She was just the girl who replaced targets. No rank, no ribbons, no respect. When the Navy SEAL shouted that his rifle was broken, she did something no one expected. She corrected him. Out loud. In front of the whole team. They laughed. They mocked her. One even asked if she'd ever held a real rifle. But 60 seconds later the range went silent. Because this wasn't just some college kid with a summer job. This was the daughter of a sniper legend. And she was about to prove it with 3 perfect shots that would change her life forever. Stay with me because what happened next made even the commander stop and say, "That's not marksmanship. That's mastery." The sun was barely up when Claire Bennett pulled into the gravel lot of the Oceanside Rifle Complex. The morning marine layers still hung thick over the cliffs, and the salty wind stung her cheeks as she stepped out of her truck, coffee thermos in hand. At 23, she was used to being invisible, here just the range girl in the khaki polo, the one who reset targets and swept brass casings. She wasn't paid to talk. She wasn't expected to know anything. But that morning would rewrite everything. Claire had only been on shift for 20 minutes when 2 black SUVs rolled in, dust kicking up behind their tires. You didn't need to see the license plates to know who they were. She'd been warned the Navy had reserved the long-range line all day for some kind of elite training. That meant one thing. Keep your head down, stay quiet, and don't get in the way. A team of Navy SEALs stepped out, gear bags, custom rifles, tight formation. Silent, focused, intimidating. Claire recognized the leader immediately. Chief Petty Officer Grant Sullivan had that command aura you couldn't fake. The others moved around him like planets orbiting the sun. Then there was the younger Guy Rodriguez. He had the look of someone trying too hard. Loud when the others were quiet. Overcompensating. She'd seen it before in civilians who thought firing a gun was about ego, not control. But this guy wasn't a civilian. He was SEAL qualified supposedly. And that's when the shouting started. Rodriguez had been shooting for over an hour. The rest of the team ran drills like clockwork, but Rodriguez kept missing wildly. The air around him grew thick with frustration until finally, he stood up and hurled his rifle into the dirt. "I'm telling you, something's wrong with this weapon," he snapped, voice sharp with embarrassment and anger. "This thing's busted." Claire froze, mid-step as she carried a fresh target to the 500-yard stand. The rest of the SEALs looked at each other, some amused, others visibly annoyed. But Chief Sullivan, he just stared. Then, before she could stop herself, Claire spoke. "The rifle's fine," she said aloud. "You're pulling your shots left because you're anticipating recoil." It was as if the wind itself stopped blowing. 8 hardened warriors all, eyes turned to her. Claire could almost hear her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. The voice in her head had been doing it all morning, analyzing Rodriguez's every movement. But the words had escaped before her mouth could ask for permission. She immediately regretted it. Rodriguez squinted at her. "Excuse me." Claire tried to backpedal, but it was too late. "I just noticed," she muttered, gripping the paper targets tighter. "Your shoulder was tightening before each shot. That's why the rounds drifted. It's not the gun." For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension was thick. Rodriguez looked ready to explode, but it was Sullivan who stepped forward. His tone was flat, but there was a sharp edge in his words. "You think you can do better?" It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't even angry. It was curious. Testing. Claire's breath caught. She wasn't supposed to answer. She was just the girl who replaced the cardboard. But she remembered what her father always told her, Gunnery Sergeant Tom Bennett, Marine sniper instructor turned paraplegic after a fall in Afghanistan. "Never speak unless you can back it up. But if you can, you'd better speak loud enough for the world to hear." She swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." Rodriguez scoffed. "Are you serious right now? What? Are we letting interns run the line now?" "Stand down," Sullivan said to him, not breaking eye contact with Claire. He bent down, picked up Rodriguez's rifle, cleared the chamber, and handed it to her. "That's the same rifle he's been using. Same setup. Wind's light, 5 miles per hour from the left. If you can hit the 500-yard steel plate, I'll buy the whole team lunch." His gaze hardened. "Miss it, and you'll be explaining to my CEO why a civilian's firing live rounds on a closed range." Claire felt the weight of the rifle settle into her hands. It was heavier than the old .308 she used with her dad on weekends. The optic was different too, more advanced, tighter eye relief. Behind her, she heard quiet laughter. Rodriguez muttered something about kids playing soldier. Someone else whistled sarcastically. She stepped into the firing lane. No one expected her to actually fire. No one expected her to even know how. She laid down on the mat, checking the bipod height, adjusted the shoulder placement, tightened her sling. She could feel the entire team watching now, but she ignored them. It wasn't the first time people had stared. It wasn't the first time they'd laughed. But what they didn't know was who her father was. "Where'd you learn to shoot?" Sullivan asked, finally, curious. Claire didn't take her eye off the scope. "My dad. He taught me when I was 12. Scout sniper instructor. Camp Pendleton. Before the injury." There was a beat of silence. Then one of the older SELs graying at the temples stepped closer. "Tom Bennett?" he said slowly. "You're telling me you're Tom Bennett's daughter?" Claire finally looked up. "Yes, sir." The shift was immediate. The laughter stopped. Rodriguez's face fell. And Chief Sullivan, he just nodded slowly, like a puzzle had just clicked into place. "Well then," he said, "let's see what Gunny Bennett's daughter can do." Claire eased her body down behind the rifle, her movements unhurried, precise. The weight of the rifle nestled into her shoulder like a familiar friend. She adjusted the stock just a hair, checked the scope's eye relief, and rolled her cheek into place on the comb just like her father had taught her a decade ago on a dusty hillside with a borrowed Remington. The murmurs from behind faded into the ocean breeze. The same SEALs who had mocked her were now deathly silent, watching. She could feel them more than hear them, 8 men, elite warriors, all standing behind one young woman in a borrowed polo shirt and scuffed boots. Claire felt oddly calm. She noted the slight push of the wind across her left cheek, watched the flag halfway downrange flutter gently. About 5 miles per hour, maybe 6. Left or right. She dialed in 0.5 mil of windage. Her breathing slowed. Then, she did something that none of them expected. She didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, Claire lifted her head from the scope, turned slightly to Sullivan, and said in a steady voice, "Before I shoot, I want to show you what Rodriguez was doing wrong." Rodriguez gave a sharp exhale. "Seriously? This is a circus." Sullivan raised a hand without looking at him. "Go ahead." Claire rolled onto her side and mimicked the exact shooting position Rodriguez had used earlier, down to the misplaced elbow, the stiff shoulders, the exaggerated grip on the pistol grip. "First issue body position," she said calmly, her voice clear in the stillness. He was resting too much weight on his left elbow, causing instability through recoil. "See this?" She shifted her balance, letting her skeleton, not her muscles, hold the rifle's weight. "This is bone-supported. That's what you want at distance." Sullivan nodded slowly. She moved on, wrapping her hands around the rifle with purpose. Second grip pressure. He was clenching it like a death grip that transfers tension right into the stock and throws off your natural point of aim. You should be holding it like you'd hold a live bird. Firm enough that it doesn't fly away. Gentle enough not to crush it. The SEALs exchanged glances. Rodriguez was no longer smirking. Claire continued, placing her finger on the trigger without pressing it. And the biggest? Trigger control. He was slapping Ithard. You don't yank a trigger. You press it. Straight back. Smooth. Let it surprise you. Someone behind her gave a low whistle. The older SEAL Webb crossed his arms and tilted his head. "She knows what she's talking about," he muttered. Sullivan gave no reaction, but his eyes stayed locked on Claire, watching. Then she lay back down, settled into proper position. Her breathing slowed again. She found that moment of pause between exhale and inhale and pressed. The shot cracked, echoing sharply against the coastal cliffs. Claire stayed behind the scope. No twitch, no flinch. She cycled the bolts smoothly, reloaded, realigned, and fired again. Then a third time. 3 shots, all within 15 seconds. The entire range went silent again. Even the birds seemed to pause. Claire sat up. Her hands were steady, her face unreadable. Sullivan looked through the spotting scope, said nothing at first. Then he stepped back, turned, and looked at Rodriguez. 2-inch group. Dead center. Rodriguez looked stunned. Webb gave a quiet nod of approval. "You want to tell me again it was the rifle?" Sullivan asked, voice flat. Rodriguez looked down at the gravel. Claire didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply safed the rifle, cleared the chamber, and set it down. That's when Webb stepped forward, arms crossed. You said your dad was Gunny Bennett? Yes, sir. He gave a slow exhale. I trained under him. Scout Sniper School, '06. That man turned Marines into machines. If you're even half as good as he was, his voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like thunder. Rodriguez wasn't the only one looking differently now. The whole team shifted, their posture relaxed not in dismissal, but in something closer to respect. Sullivan turned to Claire. Where do you work when you're not out here? I'm a nursing student. This is just a part-time job. He looked at her longer than before. Well, Miss Bennett, you ever thought about doing something more with this talent? She blinked. Sir, you've just diagnosed a SEAL's shooting problems, taught a lesson under pressure, and hit a 500-yard shot group cleaner than most of us do on our best day. I've just practiced a lot. With my dad. You do more than shoot, Sullivan said. You teach. You coach. And you read people. The conversation paused as the sound of tires crunching gravel echoed in the distance. A black government sedan pulled into the lot. Claire instinctively stiffened. Webb turned. That's Commander Albright. Base RCO. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. He wasn't supposed to come out today. Claire suddenly felt the weight of it all. She was a civilian. She had just fired a SEAL's weapon. She had upstaged one of their own. And now, the man who signed their training evaluations was walking across the lot with the crisp pace of an officer accustomed to full authority. Albright approached with a calculating gaze. Chief Sullivan, he said. How's the training progressing? Sullivan gave a nod. Well, sir, we've had some unexpected assistance. Oh, the commander's eyes swept the group and landed on Claire. This is Claire Bennett, Sullivan said. She works here. Her father is Tom Bennett Scout Sniper School, pre-injury. She just demonstrated some instructional level marksmanship. Commander Albright looked at her again. Longer this time. I knew Tom Bennett, he said, voice more measured. He trained my XO back in '05. That man could shoot the wings off a dragonfly. Claire offered a respectful nod. He taught me everything I know. The commander turned to Sullivan. What kind of demonstration? She corrected Rodriguez's form, coached the fundamentals, then put 3 into a 2-inch group at 500 yards. Cold bore. Albright raised an eyebrow. In that case, I'd like to see the target myself. Commander Albright stepped up to the spotting scope without a word. The wind tugged lightly at the edge of his cap as he leaned in, adjusted the focus, and scanned the target 500 yards away. The silence around him was dense. No one dared speak. After a long moment, he straightened, looked at Claire, then turned back to Sullivan. You said cold bore? Sullivan nodded once. 3 shots. No warm-up. All within 2 inches center mass. The commander tilted his head, the hint of a smile at the edge of his otherwise unreadable face. Well, he said softly, looks like Gunny Bennett didn't just pass on his name. Claire lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. The weight of everything, the eyes on her, the authority in the air, the loaded silence, it was heavier than the rifle had ever felt. Commander Albright's voice was calm but direct. And you're not military? No, sir. I'm a nursing student. I just work here part-time. You ever shoot competitively? Claire shook her head. No, sir. My dad and I shoot on weekends. That's all. Albright turned slowly to the rest of the team, scanning the circle of elite SEALs, some of whom still looked mildly stunned. Gentlemen, this young woman just demonstrated the kind of calm under pressure, technical precision, and instructional clarity that most instructors struggle to maintain under scrutiny. And she did it without any formal training or tactical background. He faced Claire again, voice lowering. Do you understand what you just did? She opened her mouth, then hesitated. I just applied what my dad taught me. Sullivan stepped forward slightly, his tone respectful but firm. Sir, I've seen a lot of shooters. I've seen a lot of instructors. But I've rarely seen someone diagnose errors that quickly, correct them so clearly, and then prove it on target. All under direct pressure. Webb added, it wasn't just the shooting. She knew what was wrong with Rodriguez the moment she saw his stance. She teaches without making you feel like you're being corrected. Rodriguez, who'd been silent since the shots rang out, cleared his throat. For what it's worth, she wasn't wrong. About any of it. Claire looked at him, expecting sarcasm. But there was none. Only quiet acceptance. Commander Albright studied her, his eyes narrowed in thought. You ever consider working in training support? Contractor side? Civilian instructors are a vital part of force readiness. Claire blinked. No, sir. I mean, I haven't really thought about it. I've been focused on finishing school. He nodded. Understandable. But what you just did doesn't come from textbook knowledge. That comes from years of practice, repetition, and instinct. You can't teach instinct, but you can teach the rest. Then, almost as an afterthought, he turned to Sullivan. If you're willing, I'd like to see her sit in on the next advanced session. Observing only. But if she sees something we miss, I want to know about it. Sullivan didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Claire's eyes widened. What do you mean watch SEAL training? Albright looked at her. Why not? You already taught one of them something today. It felt surreal. Claire had walked into work that morning expecting another long, quiet day of resetting paper targets and sweeping brass casings. And now, here she was being invited to observe one of the most selective and intense training regimens in the world. And the most astonishing part? No one was questioning her anymore. They were listening. That afternoon, the command sedan pulled away and the SEAL team resumed training. But it wasn't like before. Claire was no longer invisible. She stood near the observation line, arms crossed, watching the shooters cycle through various long-range exercises. From time to time, Sullivan would glance over and nod an unspoken invitation for her input. She didn't overstep. She waited, watched. Then during a recoil control drill, she stepped forward. Excuse me, sir, she said quietly to Webb, who was watching the group. Third shooter, his stock weld is loose. He's getting scope shadow and shifting point of impact left. Webb raised an eyebrow, leaned toward his spotting scope, and after a moment gave a low grunt of agreement. He called a halt, whispered something to the shooter. The adjustment was made. The group tightened. Claire said nothing, simply stepped back again. Webb looked over his shoulder at her. You really can see things most folks don't. She smiled softly, hands in her pockets. I've just been watching people shoot for a long time. That evening, as the sun dipped below the Pacific and cast the range in a golden glow, Sullivan approached Claire as she locked up the gear shed. You handled yourself well today, he said simply. Thank you, sir. You don't have to call me sir, you know. I'm not your CO. She smiled. Force of habit. My dad always said respect isn't about rank. It's about readiness. Sullivan's lips curled into the faintest grin. I could see why he trained so many good shooters. He raised one too. Claire looked down, brushing a bit of dust off her sleeve. I've always shot with him, but I never thought of it as anything serious. Just weekends. Time together. Well, he said, you might want to start thinking differently. She tilted her head. Why? Sullivan shrugged lightly. Because you're not just a range girl. You're a marksman. And maybe something more. Claire didn't respond right away. But something shifted in her chest, not pride exactly. More like recognition. Of a path she hadn't seen before. A door quietly opening. And behind her, the targets she'd shot still stood in the wind. Unmoving. Dead center. Over the next few weeks, Claire Bennett's world quietly transformed. It didn't happen with press releases or headlines. There were no medals pinned to her chest or salutes in the hallway. But things changed in the way people looked at her, in the way her phone started ringing with unfamiliar area codes, and in the way her supervisor at the range now checked in with a curious deference. Jake Sullivan made good on his word. She was invited to observe more advanced training sessions, sometimes with Marines, sometimes with Air Force marksmen rotating through the base. Claire never assumed authority. She listened first, always. But when asked, her insight was sharp, technical, and humbly delivered. She never tried to impress. That's what made her so impressive. What surprised her most wasn't the way others respected her, it was how natural the work felt. There was something fulfilling about helping someone correct a small detail and watching their confidence return. Claire wasn't there to dominate or prove anyone wrong. She was there to help them see what they already had, just from a different angle. In the evenings, she still went home and studied pharmacology and anatomy. She still packed a brown bag lunch, still helped her father with his physical therapy. But inside, something was shifting. The quiet girl who once thought she'd spend her life behind hospital walls now found herself imagining range diagrams in the margins of her nursing notes. One morning, she received a call. It was from Rebecca Chun, a former Army officer turned director at Vanguard Dynamics, a civilian defense contractor specializing in marksmanship and combat readiness programs. Chun had heard about Claire through military channels, though. She didn't say exactly who. I understand you've been offering some unofficial instruction, Chun said. We're expanding our civilian instructor program. I'd like to meet. Claire didn't know what to expect when she walked into the Vanguard office. It felt clinical, professional, all glass and steel. But Chun herself was grounded and sharp-eyed, like someone who read more than you spoke. I'll be honest, Chun said after their initial meeting, most of our instructors come from military backgrounds. Snipers. Special forces. But the reports I've seen about you, they describe something rare. Claire waited. They say you don't just know how to shoot. You know how to see. Chun leaned forward. And that's not something we can teach. The offer was clear. Flexible hours around her studies, triple her current pay, full access to equipment and training tools, and opportunities to work with specialized units, law enforcement, rangers, even international partners. Claire hesitated. I'm still in school. I don't want to abandon that. You don't have to, Chun replied. We'll work around it. But let's be honest, what you're doing here is already saving lives. Her father said little when she told him, just nodded slowly and grinned. Told you, he said, his voice gravelly from the old lung injury. Shooting's just applied science. You got the mind for it. Claire smiled. It's funny. I always thought of it as just our thing. Something between you and me. Tom Bennett stared at her with tired but proud eyes. It still is. But now it's something you can pass on. Claire's first official contract was to co-teach a course for law enforcement precision teams. The other instructor was a 20-year police sniper with 3 deployments under his belt. He was skeptical of her at first, especially when she walked in without rank or ribbons. But that changed on the second day, when she fixed a team's grouping issue in 5 minutes, something he hadn't caught in 2 hours. After that, he sat down beside her and asked, "Where the hell did you learn to see like that?" She answered honestly, "From watching, from listening, from trying to understand what's not being said." Over the next year, Claire trained SWAT units, National Guard teams, and even consulted on curriculum for international marksmanship academies. She flew to a Navy competition as a guest advisor and was seated next to instructors she once watched from behind a stack of paper targets. Her old range co-workers began jokingly calling her Coach Claire. She didn't correct them, but she never forgot who she was. She still helped clean up after sessions. She still brought lunch for her dad. She still flinched slightly when someone asked for her resume because it didn't say sniper or veteran or elite. It just said Claire Bennett, student, observer, daughter, and that was enough. One afternoon, she returned to the Oceanside Range for an open training session. The SEAL team was back on rotation, new faces, a few familiar ones. As she stepped onto the gravel lot, Rodriguez, now quieter, more measured, walked up beside her. You coming to teach or observe? He asked. Claire shrugged. Maybe a little of both. He smiled, then handed her a fresh match-grade rifle. Want to take the first shot? Claire chuckled. Nah, I'll wait until someone blames the gun again. As the wind danced over the cliffs and the distant sound of shots echoed across the range, Claire stood silent, watching, not because she had something to prove, but because someone had once handed her a rifle and stepped aside. And now, it was her turn to do the same. Sometimes the most extraordinary people don't walk in with rank or reputation. They don't announce themselves with medals or titles. They show up quietly, observe patiently, and when the moment comes, they raise their hand and say just one thing. I can help. Claire never shouted. She never demanded. She just showed up with integrity, skill, and the wisdom her father taught her on quiet weekend mornings. And in doing so, she taught the rest of us something far more powerful. Greatness doesn't need permission. It just needs one moment of courage. Have you ever underestimated someone only to be proven wrong in the most incredible way? Or maybe you've been the quiet one, waiting for your chance to step up. Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every one, because sometimes the best lessons come from the ones nobody saw coming.